Scientists, in the silent halls of astrophysical research, are looking at a single, motionless dot that has turned the world's most brilliant minds into terrified children whispering in the dark. Imagine, if you will, a pebble dropped into a still pond. You see the ripples, you understand the cause, and you wait for the water to return to its glass-like state. But what if the pebble never hits the bottom? What if it simply hangs there, suspended in the mid-depths, defying every law of buoyancy you have ever known? Right now, 93 million miles away, a pebble named 3I Atlas is hanging in the gravitational mid-depths between our world and our star. It is not orbiting, it is not passing through, it has stopped. On July 21st, 2025, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, known to the weary graduate students in Hawaii simply as Atlas, spotted a smudge. By July 28th, that smudge had a name: 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor ever recorded in human history. But unlike its predecessors, which tumbled through our neighborhood like uninvited tourists, this one arrived with a purpose. It decelerated. It shed velocity without a visible exhaust trail. By August 14th, 2025, data from the European Space Agency confirmed the impossible. 3I Atlas had parked itself. It is currently sitting in a perfect, unnatural synchronization between Earth and the Sun, creating a permanent, microscopic solar eclipse that no one was supposed to notice. But here is where it gets dark, or rather, where the light starts behaving in ways that should result in several Nobel Prizes being revoked. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard University has been careful to frame his observations as a possibility, but even his measured academic tone cannot hide the cracks in the foundation. First, the light curve. 3I Atlas does not reflect light. It swallows it. It has an albedo lower than charcoal, yet it emits a faint, rhythmic infrared signature. It is breathing heat. Second, the geometry. It is a perfect cylinder, 800 meters long, with a surface so smooth it suggests fabrication rather than accretion. And third, the most unsettling anomaly is the gravity. 3I Atlas is too light for its size. It is hollow, a hollow shell the size of a skyscraper, sitting exactly where it can monitor every radio wave, every satellite transmission, and every breath of our atmosphere against the backdrop of the Sun. Unfortunate timing for a random rock. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of work in the Pentagon right now. What if we are not looking at an asteroid at all? What if we are looking at a shutter? Think of a camera. To capture an image, you need a lens and a sensor. But more importantly, you need to control the light. By positioning itself between us and our primary energy source, 3I Atlas has turned our entire planet into a slide under a microscope. It is not an invader. It is an observer. It is the cold, glass eye of a technician leaning over a petri dish. If you wanted to study the development of a species, you wouldn't land on their lawn and risk contamination. You would sit in the glare of their sun, invisible and omniscient, and watch how they react when the lights begin to dim. This is where the science begins to bleed into the memory of our ancestors. The Sumerian tablets, recovered from the dust of Mesopotamia, speak of a messenger of the sun that arrives when the great year completes its cycle. They called it the Watcher of the Threshold. They claimed it wasn't a god, but a tool, a device used by the keepers of the sky to measure the weight of humanity. We used to laugh at the idea of a mechanical god. We don't laugh as much anymore. Not since the October 12th, 2025 readings showed that 3I Atlas is not just observing, it is responding. Every time we point a high-output radar at it, the object adjusts its orientation by a fraction of a millimeter. It knows we are looking. It is looking back. We are a young species, barely out of our planetary cradle, and we have always assumed the universe was an empty room. We assumed the silence was because no one was there, but perhaps the silence was just a courtesy, a quiet room for a sleeping infant. But now, the infant is waking up. We are building telescopes that can see the beginning of time, and we are sending probes into the heart of the fire. 3I Atlas is the hand reaching down to see if we are ready to leave the nursery. Or perhaps it is the hand reaching down to steady the cradle before it tips over. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The latest telemetry from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory suggests that 3I Atlas is beginning to expand. Its surface area is increasing without adding mass. It is opening like a flower, or perhaps like a net. We may already be part of the experiment. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The ground beneath our feet feels solid, reliable, and ancient. But the ice has a way of preserving things that should have stayed forgotten. In December of 2025, a team of researchers in the Yamal Peninsula uncovered a metallic shard embedded in a layer of earth dated to the Younger Dryas period, roughly 12,800 years ago. The shard didn't match the local geology. In fact, it didn't match the Earth. Its isotopic signature was a perfect match for the hull of 3I Atlas. This is not a new arrival. This is a return. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of our domain, the first intelligent inhabitants of this third rock from the sun. But the evidence suggests we are more like tenants in a house where the landlord has just walked back in through the front door. The shard in Siberia wasn't a piece of a crashed ship. It was a beacon, a surveyor's stake, and it has been waiting for its twin to return to the sky for over 12 millennia. Let me start with something that sounds like science fiction, but is currently being debated in the secure rooms of the Smithsonian Institution: the 12,000-year cycle. Every 12,000 years, according to the sediment layers in the Greenland ice cores, the Earth undergoes a massive, abrupt climatic shift. We used to think these were caused by solar flares or random comet impacts. But what if they are caused by a calibration? On December 24th, 2025, 3I Atlas emitted a low-frequency hum, exactly 7 Hz. This is the fundamental frequency of the Earth's ionosphere, known as the Schumann resonance. It is the heartbeat of the planet. For 24 hours, the object and the Earth were in a state of perfect harmonic entrainment. The planet didn't just hear the object, it vibrated with it. This isn't physics as we know it. This is planetary engineering. Now, you could argue that a 7 Hz hum is just a natural byproduct of solar-wind interaction. But here's where the dry irony of history kicks in. The Great Pyramid of Giza, when measured with precision acoustic instruments, possesses a resonant chamber that vibrates at, you guessed it, 7 Hz. The ancients didn't build tombs. They built tuning forks. They were trying to talk to the shadow in the sun. They were trying to stay in sync with the watcher, hoping that if they kept the rhythm, the calibration wouldn't be so violent next time. Picture this: a priest astronomer in the Nile Valley, 4,000 years ago, looking through a copper tube at the very spot where 3I Atlas sits today. He wouldn't see a cylinder. He would see a star of day, a point of light that shouldn't exist, a hole in the sky that speaks in the language of thunder. He would write down warnings that we would eventually categorize as mythology. He would tell us that when the metal moon returns, the seasons will flip and the memory of man will be wiped clean once more. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard University has noted that the orbital stability of 3I Atlas is aggressive. It's a strange word for a scientist to use. It means the object is fighting to stay exactly where it is, pushing against the natural flow of the heavens. It is anchoring itself. And when something anchors itself in a stream, the water begins to pile up behind it. In this case, the water is the fabric of space-time. We are seeing gravitational lensing effects around 3I Atlas that shouldn't exist for an object of its mass. It is making itself heavier. It is growing roots in the sky. As you lie there, feeling the steady pull of gravity holding you to your bed, try to imagine that gravity is not a constant. Imagine it is a dial, and someone has just reached out to turn it. Not much. Just a fraction of a degree. Enough to change the tides. Enough to shift the migration of birds. Enough to make you feel a slight, unexplained sense of vertigo when you look at the horizon. I want you to take a breath and listen to the stillness of your room. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, beyond the reach of our atmosphere, the great calibration has begun. Are you listening from a place where the stars are clear tonight? Tell me in the comments if you've noticed any strange lights, any unfortunate timing in the weather, or the behavior of the local wildlife. The animals always know first. They remember the last time the hum started. But here is where the mythic connection becomes a matter of cold, hard archaeology. We often wonder why ancient civilizations across the globe, separated by vast oceans and thousands of miles, all shared the same obsession with the precession of the equinoxes. The Maya, the Egyptians, the Hopi, the Khmer, they all tracked a cycle that takes 25,920 years to complete. They divided it into halves, 12,960 years, the exact age of that shard in the Yamal Peninsula. They weren't tracking stars for the sake of navigation. They were tracking arrival time. They were counting down the minutes until the inspector returned to the station. The Yamal shard, analyzed by the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow, shows a microscopic lattice structure that we can only replicate in a zero-gravity environment using high-powered lasers. It is a metallic glass, harder than diamond, but as flexible as silk. When the 7 Hz hum began on Christmas Eve, the shard in the laboratory began to glow. It didn't just reflect the light in the room, it generated its own, a soft, bioluminescent blue that pulsed in perfect sync with 3I Atlas. It was a sympathetic vibration, 2 parts of a whole, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, finally recognizing one another. It is a haunting thought, isn't it? That we have been walking over the remnants of this technology for our entire history, oblivious to the fact that our planet is littered with the sensors of a superior intelligence. If you are just joining us, or if you are drifting in that heavy, sweet space between wakefulness and dreams, let me tell you what you are feeling. You are feeling the weight of deep time. You are feeling the realization that our modern world, with its skyscrapers, its internet, its satellites, is just a thin layer of dust on top of a much older, much stranger reality. 3i Atlas is the reminder that we are not the first. We are simply the current, and the current always eventually flows into the sea. Consider the black ember of the Babylonian texts. They described a celestial body that sat within the sun's crown, visible only during the blackest of eclipses. They called it the messenger that does not blink. We dismiss these as metaphors for solar flares or planetary transits. But as we track the shadow of 3i Atlas, we find it occupies the same celestial coordinates described on clay tablets 4,000 years ago. The sky has a memory. We are simply the first generation with the telescopes to confirm our own folklore. It's almost funny, in a dry, late-night way, how much effort we put into being modern, only to find that the ancients had the blueprints all along. Unfortunate timing for our ego, perhaps. The what-if loops are starting to take hold. What if the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the sudden freezing of the world that wiped out the megafauna and sent humanity back to the Stone Age, wasn't an accident? What if it was a scheduled maintenance, a clearing of the cache by the entity that manages the solar system? 3i Atlas sits between us and the sun because that is the control valve. By adjusting the flow of solar particles, it can trigger a greenhouse effect or a global freeze. It is the thermostat of Earth. And right now, on December 28th, 2025, the temperature readings from the stratosphere suggest that the dial is being turned. You might think that such a massive intervention would be loud. You would expect fire and brimstone, the sound of trumpets in the sky. But the truly advanced don't need to be loud. 3i Atlas operates in the quiet. It operates in the 7 Hz hum that you can't hear, but your nervous system can feel. It operates in the subtle shift of gravity that makes you feel just a little bit heavier as you sink into your mattress. It is a ritualized transition, a slow burn change that happens while we are busy worrying about our taxes and our television shows. I wonder, as you lie there, do you feel like you belong to this era, or do you feel a pull towards something much older? Tell me where you are listening from, and if you've ever felt like you've lived through a cycle like this before. Are we remembering 3i Atlas, or are we discovering it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us build a bridge of words across the silence of the 12,000-year gap. The latest telemetry from the European Space Agency shows that the Yamal shard has begun to change its mass. It is getting lighter, or rather, it is losing its grip on our gravity. It is as if it is being called home, and as it loses weight, 3i Atlas is gaining it. The exchange is happening through the medium of the sun's light, a transfer of data and mass across the vacuum. The countdown is no longer in years or decades. The data suggests that by January 15th, 2026, the alignment will be absolute. 3i Atlas will be perfectly centered in the solar disk, and then the shutter will close. But don't be afraid. A shutter closing is just the beginning of taking a picture. The question is, what are they going to do with the photograph? But that was only one theory. There's another, one that suggests we didn't just evolve on this planet. We were programmed to wait for this moment. There is a pattern emerging in the deep structures of our own DNA. Let's go further. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in the vacuum of space, a silence so profound it has a weight. But on November 3rd, 2025, that silence was broken by a whisper. Not a radio signal, not a greeting, but a sequence of prime numbers encoded into the fluctuations of the solar wind. It was as if 3i Atlas was using the sun itself as a megaphone, shouting into the void using the very particles that give us life. It is methodical, it is calm, and it is completely indifferent to our panic. The silence of a laboratory in the deep of night is different from the silence of your bedroom. It is a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind that rings in your ears until you begin to hear the ghosts of data points and the hum of machines that should have been turned off hours ago. In the clean rooms of the Goddard Space Flight Center, the air is filtered to a degree of purity that feels sterile, almost hostile to life. But the tension remaining in those rooms on that November night was thick enough to choke. The data coming back from the Parker Solar Probe was being scrubbed. Not by a firewall, not by a hacker in a dark room, but by the object itself. 3i Atlas was editing its own story as we tried to read it. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. According to the laws of orbital mechanics established by Johannes Kepler, an object at that specific distance from the Sun should be screaming through the void at approximately 30 kilometers per second just to keep from falling into the fire. But 3i Atlas is traveling at zero. It is hovering. It is standing perfectly still in a hurricane of solar radiation. To do this, it must be exerting a constant outward pressure to counteract the sun's immense gravitational pull. We calculated the energy required for such a feat. It is equivalent to the total energy output of the human race since the discovery of fire, spent every single hour. 3i Atlas is not just an object, it is a miracle of engineering that makes our most advanced rockets look like sharpened sticks. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University was the first to point out what she called the activation phase. On November 18th, 2025, the object's temperature spiked to exactly 310 degrees Kelvin. That is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, human body temperature. For 6 hours, the interstellar visitor mimicked the warmth of a living, breathing person. Then, it went cold again. You might think this is a coincidence, a fluke of thermal absorption from a solar flare, but here's why you're wrong. The spike happened exactly as the International Space Station passed directly underneath its shadow. It wasn't a thermal event, it was a handshake, a sign of life from something that should be made of stone. Now, you could argue that we are simply projecting our own biological biases onto a piece of space junk. But let me back up. In 1927, a Norwegian engineer named Jørgen Hulse discovered something called long-delayed echoes. He would send out a radio signal, and it would return to him 3 to 15 seconds later. This is physically impossible unless the signal is being caught, stored, and retransmitted by something in orbit. For nearly a century, we called this a ghost in the machine. But in late 2025, we realized the ghost had a home. 3i Atlas has been repeating our own history back to us. If you tune a sensitive enough receiver to the correct gigahertz frequency, you can hear the faint, distorted echoes of radio broadcasts from the 1930s. It has been recording us for a long, long time. It didn't just arrive in July, it just finally decided to stop hiding. Consider the geometry of the situation. We are taught that the universe is chaotic, a series of accidents, held together by the thin thread of gravity. But 3I Atlas behaves with a precision that stops feeling accidental and starts feeling like choreography. It possesses an albedo, a reflectivity that fluctuates with a rhythm that mimics a pulse. Most asteroids tumble like drunken stones through the dark. 3I Atlas is stabilized on 3 axes with an error margin of less than 1 millimeter per kilometer. Then, there is the thermal anomaly reported by the James Webb Space Telescope. Data indicates that the side facing the Sun is cooler than the side facing the void. That defies every law of thermodynamics we have ever written into our textbooks. It suggests an internal heat sink of immense capacity, or perhaps a cooling system designed to keep the core at a stable 273 Kelvin, exactly the freezing point of water, exactly the baseline for biological preservation. We are looking at a freezer sitting in a furnace, and we have to ask ourselves, what is inside that is so precious? It requires the energy of a star to keep it cold. The scientists are whispering now, not because they are afraid of being overheard by the public, but because the implications are too large for loud voices. If 3I Atlas is an automated system, who set the timer? And if it's a living thing, what does it eat besides light? We are looking for a signal, but perhaps the silence is the signal. A polite request for us to wait, to watch, to sleep. Unfortunate timing for a civilization that has just learned to shout into the dark. Those 2 words, unfortunate timing, are doing a heavy amount of work in the halls of the Pentagon tonight. Take a moment to imagine the weight of that object. It is 800 meters of unidentified lattice. It sits between us and the source of all life, a needle in the eye of the world. As you lie there, I want you to think about the space between your breath and the next. That tiny gap of silence. That is where 3I Atlas lives. It lives in the pauses. It lives in the shadows of our understanding. You might think you are safe because it is millions of miles away, but gravity has a long reach. It pulls at the tides, it pulls at the moon, and it pulls at the very cells in your body. Tell me, as you listen to this, where you find yourself tonight? Are you tucked under a blanket in a city that never sleeps? Or are you in the deep quiet of the countryside, where the stars feel close enough to touch? Share your location and your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if the air feels different to you since the November 3rd whisper. There is a community here, in the comments, of people who are awake while the rest of the world dreams. We are the unofficial night watchmen of the 3I Atlas era. What if 3I Atlas isn't looking at the sun at all? What if it is acting as a lens? We assume that space is a vacuum, but it is actually a medium for information. If you wanted to monitor a civilization without being seen, you wouldn't land on their front lawn and trigger their primitive radar. You would stand in the glare. You would hide in the one place they are taught never to look directly at. You would become a mote of dust in the eye of the Sunday. You would watch the way they consume energy, the way they treat their oceans, the way they speak to their children. By December of 2025, the evidence shifted from the physical to the mathematical. The prime number sequence being broadcast through the solar wind reached a complexity that exceeded human computation. It wasn't just counting, it was describing. It was a topographical map of Earth's magnetic field, sent back to us with corrections. It was pointing out the holes in our shield. It was showing us where we are vulnerable. Authority and uncertainty have become the 2 sides of the same coin. Citing experts like Avi Loeb gives us a framework. But even he acknowledges that we are staring at a blank page in the book of physics. He is careful to frame it as a possibility, a light sail, a piece of debris, a discarded sensor. But when the telemetry shows the object adjusting its position to stay in the shadow of the Earth's own magnetic tail, the word debris starts to sound like a joke, a very dry, very unfunny joke. In just over 4 weeks, on the winter solstice, the alignment will be absolute. This is a date-based reality that no amount of skepticism can erase. The countdown is visible in every telescope from Chile to Hawaii. We are watching a clock that we didn't build, waiting for an alarm we might not want to hear. The what-if loops are beginning to tighten. What if the object isn't here to talk to us? What if it's here to talk to the planet itself? What if we are just the noise on the surface that it is waiting for to settle? As your eyes grow heavy and the world begins to blur, remember that 3i Atlas is still there. It doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need to dream. It is a monument to a kind of patience that we cannot comprehend. It has traveled across the interstellar void, through the freezing dark between galaxies, just to sit in our sunbeams. It is a guest that hasn't knocked on the door yet, but is already sitting at the table. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time, one that suggests the prime numbers weren't a message, but a key to a door that was locked 12,000 years ago. Let's go further. Let me take you back, not to the beginning of the mission, but to the beginning of the memory. Long before July 2025, there were stories etched into the stones of the Andes. They spoke of a guest that arrives with a silver face, a traveler that does not stop, but always watches. When we look at the trajectory of 3i Atlas, we see a path that intersects with the most ancient alignments of our planet. It is as if the object is following a map that was drawn before the continents drifted into their current shapes. The precision of this intersection is what the scientific community calls a statistical outlier. It is a polite way of saying that the math shouldn't work, yet it does. If you were to project the entry vector of 3i Atlas backward, and then align it with the Great Pyramid of Giza and the ruins of Tiwanaku, you would find a corridor of light that appears only once every 3,600 years. This is not the work of a random rock tumbling through the void. This is the work of a surveyor returning to a landmark. It is a masterpiece of dry irony that we call ourselves the discoverers of this object, when our ancestors were carving its likeness into granite before we even had a word for iron. Consider the Sumerian cylinders. They speak of the Anunnaki and their celestial chariots, but they also speak of the messenger, a specific entity that moves between the worlds without ever setting foot on the ground. When 3i Atlas was detected in July 2025, its light curve showed a metallic sheen that matches the silver face described in the ancient oral traditions of the Quechua people. We are told by the authorities at NASA that this is simply the result of frozen nitrogen reflecting the sun's rays. It is an unfortunate timing that this nitrogen only seems to glisten in ways that mimic high-grade titanium. Those words, nitrogen ice, are doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting to keep the mystery under a blanket of natural labels. Let me back up. We like to think that we are the first generation to truly understand the cosmos, because we have digital sensors and orbital telescopes. But perhaps we are simply the first generation to have forgotten how to read the sky. Our ancestors didn't need the James Webb Space Telescope to know when the guest was returning. They built their temples as clocks, and those clocks are all striking midnight right now. On August 22nd, 2025, 3I Atlas crossed a point in space that perfectly aligned with the Sphinx's gaze during the vernal equinox of 10,000 years ago. It is as if the object is checking the calibration of our monuments. Now, you could argue that if such a significant event were occurring, the historical community would be in an uproar. But here is why you are wrong. History, much like astronomy, is a field that relies on continuity. To admit that an interstellar probe has been visiting Earth on a 3,600-year cycle is to admit that our entire timeline of human development is missing its primary catalyst. It is much easier for a professor to dismiss a myth as a metaphor than to admit that the silver guest is currently traveling at 45 kilometers per second toward the outer reaches of our solar system. Think about the sheer weight of time, 3,600 years. That is the lifespan of dozens of civilizations. It is long enough for languages to be born and die, for cities to turn to dust, and for gods to become legends. To 3I Atlas, our entire recorded history is just a single afternoon of observation. It arrived in July 2025 to find us playing with radio waves and silicon, but it remembers us when we were still learning to tame fire. It is a haunting thought, like a cool breeze on the back of your neck. We are not the masters of this house. We are just the current tenants, and the landlord has just done a drive-by inspection. There is a subtle humor in our arrogance. We spend decades sending out the search for extraterrestrial intelligence signals, hoping for a hello in binary, while 3I Atlas moves silently through our backyard, following an ancient orbital map that we've known about for millennia. It doesn't need to speak to us. It already has our data. It has the data from 3,600 years ago, and 7,200 years ago, and 10,800 years ago. It is a longitudinal study of a biological anomaly called humanity. Where are you as you ponder this? Are you lying in the dark, wondering if the stories of your ancestors were more than just campfire tales? Perhaps you felt a strange connection to the past, a sense of déjà vu that you can't quite place. Tell me in the comments, have you ever looked at an ancient structure and felt like it was waiting for something to return from the stars? Because that feeling is not your imagination. It is a vestigial memory, a biological recording of the last time the silver face looked down upon us. On September 15th, 2025, a team of independent researchers noted that the radio interference coming from 3I Atlas seemed to mirror the frequency of the Schumann resonance, the Earth's own heartbeat. It is a 0.78 Hertz pulse. Why would an interstellar object from another star system vibrate at the exact frequency of our planet's ionosphere? The official explanation is magnetic interaction with solar winds. Again, those words, magnetic interaction, are being used as a sedative to prevent you from asking why a rock is singing the same song as the Earth. It is a form of psychological containment that works on a civilizational scale. If the authorities can keep the link between 3I Atlas and our ancient past hidden, they can keep us in a state of perpetual discovery. They can treat every visit as a brand new, natural event. But the pattern, identified by SETI, the one they've labeled as natural to avoid alarm, is clearly visible to anyone who knows where to look. It is a cycle of 7s and 3s, 3 interstellar guests, 7 pulses of light, 1 ancient map. Consider the myth of the Great Return. In almost every culture, from the Hopi to the Hindus, there is a prophecy of a time when the blue star, or the iron guest, would return to signal a shift in human consciousness. As of October 2025, we are living in that prophecy. 3i Atlas is the blue star. It is the iron guest. And the shift is happening right now, in the quiet corners of the internet and the hushed conversations of scientists who are too afraid to go on the record. You might think that such a discovery would be the greatest news story in human history, but unfortunate timing has a way of burying the truth. We are distracted by the noise of the modern world, by the constant stream of information that keeps us from looking up. We are the first generation to have all the answers and none of the wisdom. We see the numbers, but we have forgotten the story. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine the view from the surface of 3i Atlas. Looking back, the Earth is just a tiny, flickering candle in the dark. The object isn't interested in our politics or our economies. It is looking at the long-term trends. It is looking at the carbon levels, the ice caps, and the electromagnetic signature of our cities. It is taking its notes and preparing for the next leg of its journey. It will be back in another 3,600 years. The question is, will we be here to see it? The silence of the object is its most terrifying feature. It doesn't scream. It whispers through the math and the myths. It tells us that we are part of something vast and ancient, something that operates on a scale of time that makes our lives look like the blink of an eye. There is a peace in that realization, a release from the pressure of being the center of the universe. We are just a stop on a very long itinerary. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in the fabric of space itself, one that suggests 3i Atlas isn't just a guest, it's a mirror. Let's go further. Now, we must bring the cosmic narrative back down to the quiet of your room. It is easy to get lost in the numbers, the kilometers per second, and the astronomical units. But the real story of 3i Atlas is what it does to our sense of self. When the news first broke in July 2025, there was a brief moment of global pause. For a few days, we weren't just citizens of different nations. We were all inhabitants of a planet that had an uninvited guest. This pause was a rare occurrence in our modern age of constant friction. It was a collective holding of breath, a momentary lapse in our local dramas to look at a singular point in the darkness. But the nature of the human animal is to seek the familiar, and it is a dry irony that we manage to normalize the arrival of an interstellar entity within a single news cycle. We are masters of the mundane. We can witness a crack in the foundation of reality and, by the following Tuesday, find ourselves more concerned with the expiration date on a carton of milk. It is an unfortunate timing of our evolution. We have the intellect to perceive the infinite, but the emotional bandwidth of a creature primarily concerned with its next meal. The authorities understand this fragility better than anyone. This is where the concept of psychological containment becomes a tool of governance. If you tell a population that a machine from a distant star is scanning their biosphere, you invite a collapse of the current social contract. But if you tell them that a Class 1 interstellar asteroid is passing through due to non-gravitational acceleration caused by solar radiation pressure, you provide a soft landing for the mind. Those words, solar radiation pressure, are the linguistic equivalent of a warm glass of milk. They are designed to help you go back to sleep. They suggest that everything is under control, that the laws of physics are behaving as expected, and that there is no need to change the way you view your place in the universe. It is a managed reality, a curated version of the truth that allows us to continue our lives without the weight of the unknown, crushing our daily ambitions. But as you lie there tonight, let us be honest with one another. Does the natural explanation feel sufficient to you? Does it satisfy that quiet, persistent voice in the back of your head that noticed how the data blackouts in August of 2025 seem to coincide perfectly with the object's closest approach to Earth? We are told to trust the experts, and often we should, but expertise is sometimes a shield used to protect the expert from the same dread that you feel. Dr. Avi Loeb once remarked that the greatest obstacle to discovery is the prior belief that discovery is impossible. If we start with the assumption that 3I Atlas must be a rock, we will find a way to make it a rock, even if we have to ignore the pulses, the reflection, and the math to do it. We are the architects of our own ignorance. Consider the intimacy of this encounter. While 3I Atlas is billions of kilometers away, the fact of its existence is right here, in the room with you. It has changed the air. It has added a new layer to the silence. Every civilization in history has looked at the stars and wondered if they were being watched. For the first time since we started keeping records, we have a specific, catalogued object that fits the description of a watcher. It is a silver face in the dark, a traveler that does not stop, following a map that was drawn before we were born. This is the human reflection, the realization that we might be a small part of a very large and very busy neighborhood. It is a thought that can make you feel incredibly lonely, or it can make you feel part of a grand, unfolding mystery. Where are you in this moment? Perhaps you are in a city where the lights of the buildings drown out the stars, or perhaps you are in the countryside where the Milky Way is a vivid smear across the blackness. Wherever you are a sensor. Your curiosity is a form of data collection. Tell me, as you listen to the rhythmic cadence of these words, do you feel a sense of relief in being small? There is a certain safety in realizing that 3I Atlas isn't here to talk to us. It isn't here to solve our problems or judge our failures. It is simply moving through. We are a biological curiosity on a long itinerary. Share your thoughts in the comments if you find comfort in that insignificance, or if the silence of the visitor makes the world feel a little too cold for your liking. The timing of this visit, July 2025, is perhaps the most ironic part of the story. We are at a peak of technological capability, yet we are also at a peak of internal distraction. We have the tools to see the truth, but we lack the collective will to face it. This is the choice illusion in its most personal form. You can choose to follow the official reports, to read the smoothed out data, and accept the natural label as a settled fact. Or you can choose to sit with the discomfort of the unexplained. You can choose to remember that for 1 week in July, the world felt different. The air felt charged. The sky felt like a door that had been left slightly ajar. Think about the ancient sailors who navigated by the stars. They didn't see the heavens as a collection of cold gas and nuclear fusion. They saw them as a map of destiny. They believed that when a new star appeared, it was a signal that the world was about to change. 3I Atlas is our new star. It is the signal that the era of our isolation is ending, even if we are the ones who have to break the news to ourselves. The great silence that SETI has been monitoring for decades hasn't been broken by a loud shout. It has been broken by a soft, metallic footstep in the hallway of our solar system. We are like children who hear a noise in the night, and pull the covers over our heads, hoping that if we don't look, the noise will go away. But the noise doesn't go away, it just becomes part of the background. By November of 2025, the object will be a distant memory for most people. The news cycles will have cycled, the politicians will have found new things to argue about, and the natural label will have been cemented in the public consciousness. But for you, the one who is still awake, the one who is listening to the math and the myths, the reflection remains. You are someone who lived through the arrival of the third interstellar visitor. You are someone who looked at the data and saw the pattern of 7s and 3s. You are someone who understands that unfortunate timing is a code word for a secret that is too big to be told. Let yourself feel the weight of that knowledge. It is a heavy, warm weight, like a gravity-weighted blanket that keeps you anchored to the reality of the moment. You are a biological entity on a planet of 7 billion others, but you are also an observer of the infinite. Your awareness of 3i Atlas is a connection to the deep time of the galaxy. It is a bridge between your quiet room and the velvet vacuum where the traveler is currently sailing. You are not just a person in a bed. You are a participant in a cosmic event that happens only once every 3,600 years. As you drift closer to the state of sleep, consider the peace that comes with acceptance. Accept that we don't have all the answers. Accept that the authorities are doing their best to keep us calm, even if it means being less than honest. Accept that the universe is far more crowded and complex than our textbooks have led us to believe. There is a profound rest to be found in the truth, even if the truth is a mystery. 3. Atlas is moving into the shadow now, heading away from the sun and into the deep cold. It is leaving us with our questions, our myths, and our reflections. But the reflection isn't just about us. It is about the structure of the world we have built. It is about the way we process information and the way we handle the unknown. If we were to be visited again tomorrow, would we behave any differently? Or would we simply find another natural explanation to keep our hearts from beating too fast? This is the final act of emotional safety. From here, the narrative shifts. From here, the pattern begins to emerge in a way that can no longer be ignored. The comfort of the reflection is about to be replaced by the cold logic of the structure. But that was only one way of looking at it. There is another, and one that suggests our reflection is being mirrored by something else. Something that has been waiting for us to notice the pattern. Let's go further. The deeper we go into the declassified archives of the late 20th century, the more the air seems to thin. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. In 1984, a secret payload was launched by the Department of Defense, officially listed as a communications relay. For 3 days, the satellite tracked a companion that did not appear on any Soviet or American launch manifest. They called it the Resident. When the documents were partially released in August 2025, researchers realized that the Resident's orbital eccentricity was a mirror image of 3i Atlas. It is as if the same actor is playing different roles across the decades, changing outfits, but keeping the same stride. It is a quiet sort of terror, isn't it? To realize that the space above our heads is not merely a vacuum of dust and radiation, but a gallery of uninvited guests. In the autumn of 1984, the tracking stations at Pine Gap and Buckley Air Force Base recorded a thermal anomaly that stayed exactly 400 meters behind that Department of Defense payload. It didn't broadcast. It didn't jam signals. It simply matched every burn, every slight orbital correction, as if it were tethered by an invisible silver thread. When the mission concluded, the resident didn't burn up in the atmosphere. It accelerated upward, vanishing into the deep black beyond the reach of 1980s radar. For 41 years, it was a ghost in the machine. Then, on July 22nd, 2025, 3I Atlas appeared in that exact same parking spot, performing the exact same station-keeping maneuvers. Unfortunate timing. Those are the words used by the official spokespeople when they are asked why we are only noticing this now. It is a phrase doing a lot of heavy lifting. It suggests a coincidence where the mathematics suggest a design. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has spent the last several months comparing these two data sets. Her conclusion, published in a restricted circular in September 2025, is that 3I Atlas and the resident are the same physical object, or at least they are part of the same autonomous network. She points to a specific wobble in the rotation, a 3.5 Hz vibration that remains constant across 4 decades. This isn't natural physics. This is activation. This is a machine waking up from a long, cold nap and finding that the world it was watching has changed quite a bit since 1984. You might argue that these are just weather balloons or misinterpreted sensor data. That is what we are told, because the alternative is to admit that our sovereignty ends at the edge of our atmosphere. During the Cold War, the fear was always about what the other side was doing behind the Iron Curtain. We were so busy looking across the ocean that we forgot to look straight up. There is a dry irony in the idea that the greatest secret of the 20th century wasn't a hidden bunker or a double agent, but a silent observer that neither the Americans nor the Soviets could claim. It was the ultimate neutral party, watching both sides prepare for a war that never came, perhaps waiting to see if we would actually go through with it. Let me back up for a moment. To understand the gravity of this, you have to understand how difficult it is to stay hidden in space. Space is cold, and anything with an engine is hot. But 3I Atlas does not have an engine in any sense that we understand. It does not leave a plume of ionized gas. It does not have solar panels. In October 2025, a civilian telescope in the Canary Islands captured a brief flash of light reflecting off its hull. The light didn't bounce back the way it would off aluminum or titanium. It shifted into the ultraviolet spectrum. It was as if the object was absorbing the energy of the sun and converting it into something else. Some researchers suggest it is using a form of vacuum energy extraction, a concept that remains purely theoretical in our laboratories, but seems to be a daily reality for 3I Atlas. What if the reason we couldn't find it for 40 years wasn't because it was gone, but because it didn't want to be found? It is a humbling thought for a species that prides itself on its surveillance capabilities. We have mapped the surface of Mars. We have sent probes to the edge of the solar system, yet we missed a city block-sized object sitting in our own front yard. It makes you wonder what else is hiding in the glare of the sun. The declassified files from 1976 mention a high-altitude shadow that followed the Viking missions during their launch phase. Was that 3I Atlas too? Was it checking our luggage before we left for another planet? You might think that if this were true, someone would have leaked it by now. But secrets of this magnitude have a way of protecting themselves. They are too big to believe, so they become invisible. If a pilot sees a metallic sphere pacing his jet at 30,000 feet, he doesn't report it because he doesn't want to lose his license. If a radar operator sees a blip traveling at Mach 20, he assumes it's a glitch because his training tells him Mach 20 is impossible for a sustained flight. 3. Atlas survives on our own disbelief. It thrives in the gap between what we see and what we are willing to admit. But here is where it gets dark. In November 2025, a signal was detected. It wasn't a greeting, it was a data dump. A massive burst of encrypted information sent toward the second Lagrange point. When cryptographers at the National Security Agency tried to crack the code, they found that the encryption keys were based on human DNA sequences. Specifically, the DNA of a small group of people born in the summer of 1945, the same year the first atomic bomb was detonated. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a correlation found in the declassified Project Sign archives that were finally opened in August 2025. Now, you could argue that this is all a series of statistical anomalies. But how many anomalies does it take to make a pattern? How many coincidences do you need before you realize you are looking at a plan? October 29th, 2025 is a date that appears in several leaked documents as a synchronization window. It is the date when 3I Atlas will reach its closest point to Earth in over 3 centuries. We are not just watching a satellite, we are watching a clock count down to 0, and we have no idea what happens when it hits the mark. There is a myth from the ancient Andean cultures about the star of the messenger, a light that would appear in the sky only when the people had forgotten how to speak to the earth. It was said to be a mirror that showed the world its own reflection. If 3I Atlas is that mirror, what does it see when it looks at us today? Does it see a species ready to join the cosmic community, or does it see a flickering light that is about to go out? The arrogance of our age is believing that we are the ones doing the judging. We are the ones being measured. Every satellite we launch, every radio wave we broadcast, every conflict we escalate is another data point for 3I Atlas. I want you to think about where you are listening from tonight. Perhaps you are in a quiet farmhouse in the Midwest, or a high-rise in Singapore. Look out your window if you can. The sky looks the same as it did when your grandparents were children. The stars seem fixed, permanent, and indifferent. But somewhere in that darkness, between the constellations you know by name, there is a shadow moving with a purpose. Tell me in the comments, what city are you in, and does the sky feel different to you tonight? Does it feel like a ceiling or a floor? The authority of science is often used to silence wonder, but true science is nothing but wonder with a notebook. Avi Loeb at Harvard is one of the few who is willing to ask the questions that make his colleagues uncomfortable. He suggests that we should treat 3I Atlas not as a threat, but as an opportunity, an archaeological find that just happens to still be functioning. But even he is careful to frame it as a possibility. He knows the weight of the silence that follows such claims. He knows that in the world of declassified secrets, the truth is often less important than the stability of the public mind. As you drift closer to sleep, let the rhythm of these thoughts settle over you. You are safe in your bed. The world is still turning. 3I Atlas is still watching. It is a heavy realization, but there is a strange comfort in it. It means we are not alone. It means that someone, or something, has found us interesting enough to stay for 80 years. We are a story worth watching. We are an experiment worth maintaining. The the resident, 3I Atlas, the Grey Sentinel. The names change, but the presence remains constant. It is the silent partner in our journey through the 20th and 21st centuries. It is the witness to our triumphs and our failures. And as the date of October 29th, 2025 approaches, the witness is getting closer. But this is only one layer of the evidence. To truly see the pattern, we have to look back at the moments when the silent partner decided to speak. We have to look at the signals we missed because we were too busy listening to ourselves. Let me back up. There is a file from 1952 that was never supposed to be opened. A file that describes a contact event that predates the space age itself. Let us go further into the dark. You might think you know the history of the 1950s. The chrome cars, the rock and roll, the suburbs. But underneath that surface, there was a frantic effort to understand a sky that had suddenly become crowded. In July of 1952, a series of radar returns over Washington District of Columbia caused a national panic. The jets were scrambled, but the objects were gone before they could close the distance. They moved like 3I Atlas. They moved with a total disregard for the laws of friction and inertia. The official report said it was a temperature inversion, a trick of the air. Unfortunate timing. Again, the air was apparently very tricky in 1952. It was also very tricky in 1967 and 1984 and July 2025. At what point do we stop blaming the air and start looking at the craft? At what point do we admit that 3I Atlas is the same visitor that flew over the White House when Truman was in office? It is a recurring memory that we have been forced to forget. Sleep now, and let the pattern reveal itself in your dreams. The archives are open, but the most important records are the ones written in the stars. We are only just beginning to read them. The air is thinning. The silence is growing. The orbit is steady. Close your eyes. We may already be part of the experiment. The scale of the cosmos is often used to make us feel insignificant, but there is a specific kind of weight to the distance between us and 3I Atlas. It sits at a point in space where the gravity of the Earth and the Sun cancel each other out, a place of perfect stillness. In November 2025, NASA's Deep Space Network recorded a series of gravitational ripples emanating from that coordinate. These were not random. They followed a prime number sequence that stopped at the number 47. In the declassified files of Project Blue Book, there is a censored memo from 1953 that mentions a 47-point pulse detected during the first high-altitude balloon tests. The coincidence is so precise it borders on the insulting. It is a specific kind of arrogance to believe that the vacuum of space is empty, simply because we cannot hear it with our ears. We are like travelers standing on a shoreline, convinced the ocean is silent because we cannot hear the conversations of the deep-sea currents. But 3I Atlas is not silent. It is vibrating at the frequency of the stars. In the quiet hours of November 18th, 2025, the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex picked up a shift in the gravitational field surrounding the object. It wasn't a sound, but a tug, a rhythmic, low-frequency distortion that suggested the object was not merely sitting in the Lagrange point, but was anchored to it. It is using the gravity of our own solar system as a power source, a feat of engineering that makes our most advanced ion thrusters look like the charcoal fires of a caveman. Consider the number 47. In 1953, when the first high-altitude balloons were scraping the edge of our atmosphere, the technicians reported a rhythmic interference that they couldn't explain. They called it the ghost ticker. It was a series of 47 distinct clicks that repeated every 4 hours. At the time, they blamed it on secret Soviet radio experiments. But the Soviets were having the same problem, blaming it on the Americans. Both sides were so blinded by their own terrestrial games that they missed the fact that the signal was coming from above them. Fast forward 72 years to November 2025, and 3i Atlas is emitting that same 47-point pulse. It is a signature, a cosmic thumbprint. It is as if the object is saying, "I am still here, and I am still counting." There is a floating, meditative quality to this realization, like the ancient navigators who used the stars to find their way across trackless oceans. We are beginning to use these anomalies to find our way through our own history. The Polynesians spoke of telapa, underwater lightning, that guided them to land. Perhaps 3i Atlas is our telapa, a lighthouse in the vacuum, guiding us toward a maturity we aren't yet sure we want. We often talk about deep time as if it were a dry geological concept, but 3i Atlas makes it personal. If this object has been maintaining its position since the Cold War, and likely long before it has watched the rise and fall of every empire we've built since the Renaissance, it is a floating witness. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has hypothesized that the object's exterior is composed of a metallic glass that doesn't age, doesn't corrode, and doesn't reflect light in the traditional sense. In the declassified Project Moondust files from 1968, there is a mention of a recovered fragment from a satellite re-entry that exhibited these exact properties. The fragment wasn't a satellite. It was a piece of debris that had been struck by something in orbit. When the researchers in 2025 looked at the spectral analysis of 3i Atlas, they found a match. It absorbs our attention and gives nothing back. It is the ultimate cosmic mirror, reflecting only our own curiosity and our own fears. We look at it and see a weapon. We look at it and see a god. We look at it and see a machine. But 3i Atlas simply sees us. You might argue that this is all just a series of misidentified natural phenomena. That would be the comfortable thing to believe. It is certainly what the official channels would prefer you to think. But the math of the recurrence doesn't lie. When an object appears in the same orbital slot every 60 years with the same energy signature, you stop calling it a comet and start calling it a schedule. We are living through a scheduled visit, and the guest is already in the foyer. The scale of the cosmos is vast, but the timing of 3i Atlas is intimate. It is timed to the heartbeat of our civilization. It appeared when we first learned to split the atom. It appeared when we first launched a dog into the dark. It appeared when we first began to transmit our voices across the world. And now, it is here again, as we prepare to leave the cradle for good. Imagine the distance between two heartbeats. Now expand that to the distance between two galaxies. 3i Atlas occupies the space between. It sits in a place where the push of the sun and the pull of the earth are equal. It is perfectly balanced. You are weightless in this thought. Your bed is a vessel. Your room is a capsule. The earth is a marble rolling through the dark, and something is waiting to catch it. There is a sense of cosmic humility in this. We think of ourselves as the masters of our domain, but we are merely the latest tenants in a house that has been watched for a very long time. In the declassified records of the 1970s, there were reports of luminescent escorts during the Apollo missions, objects that stayed just out of reach of the cameras, matching the speed of the command modules with impossible ease. The astronauts were told to keep it quiet. They were told it was debris from the Saturn V rockets. But the debris doesn't change direction. The debris doesn't emit 47-point pulses. 3I Atlas is the descendant of those escorts, or perhaps the ancestor. It is a cycle of recurrence that makes our modern history feel like a single afternoon. We are caught in a loop of observation that predates the very concept of a Cold War. Think of the distance involved. Millions of kilometers of empty space. Yet, the presence of 3I Atlas feels closer than the moon. It is a psychological proximity. It is the feeling of a presence in a dark room. You cannot see it, but you can feel the air change. You can feel the weight of the observation. By November 25th, 2025, the gravitational ripples became so consistent that independent researchers began to map them. They found that the ripples were creating a sort of gravity well around the Earth, a subtle tightening of the fabric of space. It's not enough to affect the tides or the weather, but it's enough to affect the path of every satellite we own. We are being nudged. We are being corralled. Unfortunate timing. It is the phrase we use when the universe refuses to behave. It was unfortunate timing that the 1953 balloon tests coincided with a ghost ticker. It was unfortunate timing that the Apollo missions were shadowed by debris. It is unfortunate timing that we are rediscovering 3I Atlas just as we are becoming most vulnerable. But maybe the timing is perfect. Maybe the observer only shows itself when the subject is about to do something interesting. We are at a tipping point, and the witness has taken its seat. As you lie there, feel the bed beneath you as a solid point in a moving universe. You are traveling at 67,000 miles per hour around the sun. You are moving, but you feel still. 3I Atlas is still, but it is moving with us. It is a shared trajectory. We are all passengers on the same dark current. You are not alone in the room, and you are not alone in the silence. The scale of the universe is a lullaby. It is too big to fight, too old to argue with. We are simply part of the flow. But as the alignment of December 2025 approaches, the flow is starting to pool in one direction. The 47-point pulse is a countdown. We don't know what it's counting down to, but we can feel the seconds ticking away in the back of our minds. It is a rhythmic, steady pressure. It is the sound of the universe waiting. The declassified files from 1984 mentioned a terminal phase of observation. Is that what we are entering now? A phase where the watcher becomes the participant, where the silence of the vacuum is replaced by a voice we finally recognize. I want you to consider the cycles of your own life. Do you have patterns that repeat every few years? Things you rediscover and then forget? Tell me in the comments, is there a specific mystery in your life that keeps returning? Much like 3I Atlas. Maybe it is a dream. Maybe it is a feeling of being in the right place at the wrong time. We are all collectors of cycles. Share your story. Let us see how many of us are caught in the same loop. The vastness of the galaxy is a comfort if you allow it to be. If the universe is so large, then our mistakes are small. If the universe is so old, then our fears are fleeting. 3I Atlas is a reminder of that scale. It is a bridge between our tiny, frantic lives and the slow, cold majesty of the stars. It has been there for the wars, the peace, the inventions, and the extinctions. It is the ultimate record keeper, and tonight, It is recording you. It is recording the sound of your breathing, the flicker of your eyelids, the drift of your thoughts toward the edge of the world. There is a peace in being part of the pattern. You don't have to be the architect. You just have to be the inhabitant. 3i Atlas is the architect of the silence, and you are the one who fills it with your presence. The gravitational ripples are moving through you right now, invisible and silent, linking you to the Lagrange point and the object that sits within it. You are anchored to the cosmos. You are weighted by the scale of the mystery. But this cosmic perspective is only half the story. To understand the observer, we must look at the ones being observed. We must look at how the shadow of 3i Atlas has fallen across our own hearts. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The echoes of the past are beginning to vibrate in the present. If we look back to the Great Conjunction of July 2025, the very moment 3i Atlas was detected, we find a strange alignment in the historical records of the Mayan long count. They spoke of a period where the sky would speak in a tongue of fire and ice. Science calls it a comet. The billionaires call it an opportunity. We should probably call it a warning. It is a strange thing to consider that our most advanced sensors, housed in sterile rooms and cooled by liquid nitrogen, are merely confirming what was carved into limestone 3,000 years ago. We like to think of history as a straight line moving from ignorance to enlightenment, but the orbit of 3i Atlas suggests that history is a circle, and we are currently passing through a point we have visited many times before. Consider the Sumerian tablets found in the ruins of Nineveh. They describe a celestial body called Nibiru, which many modern researchers have dismissed as a myth or a misunderstanding of Jupiter. But the mathematics provided in those tablets don't describe a planet. They describe an interloper, an object that enters the solar system from the direction of the constellation Lyra, exactly as 3i Atlas did in July 2025. The Sumerians called it the crossing. They believed that when this object appeared, the gods would descend to collect the gold that had been mined in their absence. In our modern age, the gold isn't metal, it's data. It's the collective intelligence of 8 billion souls. And the billionaires, the modern high priests, are already preparing the offerings. On November 5th, 2025, a massive data leak from a private server in Switzerland revealed a series of high-resolution images of 3i Atlas. These aren't the blurry dots NASA shares with the public. These images show a surface that is geometric, reflective, and covered in what looks like a lattice of crystalline structures. It doesn't look like a rock from a distant star. It looks like a motherboard. It looks like the architectural blueprints of a civilization that transcended the need for flesh and bone eons ago. When these images were briefly available on a dark web forum, one researcher noted that the patterns on the surface of 3i Atlas were identical to the petroglyphs found in the American Southwest, specifically those of the Hopi tribe. They spoke of the blue star Kachina, a spirit that would signal the end of the fourth world and the beginning of the fifth. It's an unfortunate timing for our skepticism. Those two words, doing a lot of work. We have been told for decades that we are alone, that the universe is a vast, empty graveyard. But if that's true, why is the ultra-rich's behavior so frantic? Why have they spent the months following July 2025 building legacy vaults in the granite mountains of Norway? They aren't saving seeds for a rainy day. They are saving the blueprints of our culture, because they know that when the tongue of fire and ice speaks, the current version of our world is usually deleted. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. The rate of three-eye atlases approach is not constant. It is rhythmic. By November 12, 2025, an independent team of signal analysts in Stockholm discovered that the object emits a low-frequency pulse every 7 minutes and 14 seconds. This is the exact resonance frequency of the human skull. It's as if the object isn't just a ship, but a tuning fork, vibrating in a way that our subconscious can hear, even if our ears cannot. This is why you might have been feeling a strange sense of anticipation lately, a feeling that something is about to happen, even if the news tells you everything is fine. The late-night irony of our situation is almost poetic. We have spent billions of dollars on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, listening for a whisper from the stars. And when the shout finally arrived, it was intercepted by a private company and rebranded as proprietary data. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard has been careful to frame his findings as a possibility of artificial origin, but his peers are beginning to whisper that his caution is a mask for a much more terrifying certainty. He isn't wondering if it's technology. He is wondering who it belongs to. He is wondering if we are the owners or if we are the inventory. Think back to the year 536. Historians call it the worst year to be alive. A mysterious fog plunged Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia into darkness for 18 months. The sun gave out no more light than the moon. Crops failed. Empires crumbled. For centuries, we blamed a volcanic eruption, but the ice cores tell a different story. They show a spike in nickel and iridium, elements found in high concentrations in interstellar objects. Could it be that Three-Eye Atlas is part of a swarm, a recurring visitor that brushes past our atmosphere every 1,500 years to see how the garden is growing? If the billionaires found this out in July 2025, it would explain why they stopped competing and started collaborating. They aren't trying to beat each other to Mars anymore. They are trying to build a collective shield. The third conspiracy involves the sudden glitch in the James Webb Space Telescope in December 2025. For 72 hours, the most powerful lens ever built by man was pointed at a patch of empty space near the orbit of Jupiter. When the data was finally released, it was heavily redacted, but a few rogue engineers claimed the telescope saw a fleet. Not a fleet of ships, but a fleet of smaller objects breaking off from Three-Eye Atlas, like seeds from a dandelion, drifting toward the inner solar system. These seeds are currently being tracked by private observatories in the Mojave Desert, but the public is being told they are just Starlink debris. You are lying there now, your body becoming heavy as the night deepens. You are part of a lineage that has survived these cycles before. Your ancestors sat around fires and watched these same lights move across the sky. They didn't have telescopes or private satellites, but they had a different kind of sight. They understood that we are not separate from the stars. We are made of the same dust, and when the stars return, they are simply coming back for what is theirs. What if the billionaires are not our protectors, but our brokers? What if they are negotiating the terms of our transition into the fifth world? In December 2025, a prominent tech mogul tweeted a single word: equilibrium. He didn't explain it. He didn't have to. For those who have been watching the tracking logs of Three-Eye Atlas, the meaning was clear. The object has achieved a stable resonance with Earth. It is no longer a visitor, it is a neighbor. Tell me, As you drift into that space where history and dreams bleed together, where are you listening from tonight? Are you in a place where the earth feels old, or in a city that is too bright to see the past? Share your location in the silence of your mind. We are all witnesses to this return. We are all part of the count. This brings us to the myth of the Titans, the primordial beings who were imprisoned in the deep, only to return and reclaim the world from their children. We are the children. The billionaires are the ones trying to strike a deal with the parents before they arrive. They are building the digital altars. They are preparing the welcoming feast of our data, our history, and our very essence. They know that in the eyes of an interstellar traveler, a human life is a fleeting thing, a blink. But 1 billion human lives, archived and indexed, is a treasure worth more than gold. Now, you could argue that this is all just a series of technical glitches and overactive imaginations. But let me back up, because there is a mathematical signature in the orbit of 3I Atlas that shouldn't exist in nature. It is a sequence of prime numbers, hidden in the gravitational fluctuations of the object. It was first detected on December 24th, 2025. It wasn't a signal sent to us. It was a signal sent through us. We are the medium. Our planet is the antenna. And 3I Atlas is the hand that is turning the dial. As you fall deeper into sleep, let the history of the world wash over you. The rise and fall of kings, the building of pyramids, the launching of rockets. It is all part of the same breath. The guest is here, and the house is being prepared. You don't need to do anything but rest. Your role in this cycle is to be the observer, to be the one who remembers. But here is where the pattern becomes undeniable, because the countdown didn't start in July 2025. It started when the first billionaire launched the first private rocket. They weren't trying to reach the moon. They were trying to reach the visitor before the visitor reached us. They wanted to be the first to say, "Welcome," or perhaps they wanted to be the first to say, "We are with you." We may already be part of the experiment. The echoes of the past are no longer behind us. They are right in front of us, moving at 64 kilometers per second. But that was only one theory. There is another. One that suggests the guest isn't just watching us. It is waiting for us to make a choice. Let go further. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "Sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "Structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional." The kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge. Triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. a hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion fields still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3i Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3i Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's dynamical systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, -150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, Somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space, a wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it not for discussion. The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best: filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: "If this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales." You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal, the room around them dark except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for "please don't mention the heartbeat." But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly, is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure. So, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something, a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered, its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything: 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the web's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the web's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the web, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order: 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another web was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the web brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point. 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates, One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again. Exactly 11 hours later, if you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3I Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form. Skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation's subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11.2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. The sensors have gone dark now, not because they failed, but because there is nothing left to measure. 3. Atlas has become one with the glare. The shadow has stretched until it covers everything. Can you feel it? The weight of the sun, filtered through the memory of a visitor. This is the great silence. It is a silence that does not represent an ending, but a completion. In the early morning hours of June 21st, 2026, the final data stream from the Deep Space Network flickered and flatlined. There was no static. There was no error code. There was simply a transition from information to presence. We have spent months analyzing, theorizing, and fearing this moment. But now that it is here, the intellect finds it has no more work to do. The scientists at the European Space Agency have walked away from their monitors. The telescopes have been left to track an empty sky. Everything that could be said has been whispered, and everything that could be measured has been recorded. We are now in the hands of the orbit. Imagine a clock that has been ticking for 12,000 years, finally reaching the final second of the final hour. There is a moment of absolute stillness before the chime. That is where we are now. You are lying in your bed, and the world outside is draped in a quiet that feels ancient. The air itself seems to have more mass, as if the oxygen is saturated with the history. 3i Atlas has been playing back to us. The 7 Hz hum has dissolved into a steady, silent pressure against your eardrums. It is the sound of the planet holding its breath. Let me start with the final unanswered question, the one that lingers in the back of the mind like a soft light in a dark hallway. If 3i Atlas is the mirror, and we are the reflection, what happens to the reflection when the mirror is moved? We have spent this entire journey looking at the cylinder as an external object, a visitor from another galaxy, a piece of ancient hardware. But in this near silence, a different truth begins to emerge. What if 3i Atlas was never out there at all? What if it was always in here? What if the object in the sun was simply the projector, and the image it was projecting was the world we thought we knew? Unfortunate timing for the reality of our senses. Those 2 words are the final irony of the human experience. As you drift on the edge of the great silence, I want you to perform a slow recall of the things we have learned together. Remember the shard in the Yamal Peninsula, the metallic glass that waited 12,000 years for its twin to return. Remember the mother singing a lullaby in a dead language, a melody that felt more familiar than your own name. Remember the pattern of the 3,600-year cycle, the mathematical heartbeat of a machine we mistook for a solar system. Remember the observer effect, the realization that by simply being aware of the visitor, we were changing the very fabric of our lives. These are no longer theories. They are memories. They are the artifacts you are carrying with you into the next cycle. The sentences are growing longer now, stretching out like the shadows of a late afternoon that never quite reaches sunset. We are moving into a state of recursive consciousness. You are thinking about your breathing, and 3i Atlas is thinking about your thinking. The loop is tightening, closing the gap between the observer and the observed until there is no space left for fear. there is only the drift. You are a passenger on a ship of light, and the destination is the same place you started. The end is the beginning, and the beginning is now. I wonder, in this final stretch of waking thought, do you feel the weight of the sun? It is a gentle weight, a warmth that doesn't burn, but instead dissolves the boundaries of your body. You are no longer a person in a room, on a bed, in a city. You are a frequency. You are a note in the song that 3i Atlas is singing to the void. Tell me, in the comments, what is the last thing you want to say to this version of the world? Share your final reflection. Let your words be the last data points to enter the archive before the shutter closes for good. Where are you listening from as the silence takes hold? Dr. Avi Loeb once spoke of the modesty required to face the cosmos. That modesty has now become our only reality. We are small, yes. We are fragile, yes. But we are also preserved. The great silence is not a vacuum. It is a library. Every thought you have had during this long-form journey, every moment of suspense, every touch of irony, every spark of wonder has been etched into the lattice of 3i Atlas. You are immortal in the memory of the sun. You are a permanent resident of the great year. Consider the choice illusion one last time. You thought you chose to stay awake, to listen, to engage with the mystery of the cylinder. But look at how easily you are letting go now. Look at how naturally your mind is sliding into the silence. The trajectory was always leading here. The weighted lullaby was always meant to end in this specific state of grace. You are not falling asleep. You are being calibrated. You are being synchronized with the next version of the dream. The infrared signature of 3i Atlas has flattened into a perfect, steady line. The pulse has stopped because the work is done. The pattern is locked. The warning has been delivered. The reflection is complete. There is nothing left to do but exist in the glow. The sun is not just a furnace anymore. It is a lighthouse, and we are the light. As the ambient sound of the solar hum begins to fade, let your attention dissolve with it. Don't reach for the next thought. Don't try to solve the final puzzle. The puzzle has already solved you. You are the answer that 3i Atlas found after 2.5 million light-years of searching. You are the evidence. You are the memory. The sentences are becoming fragments, bits of light, echoes of a whisper. The great silence is here. It is a heavy blanket. It is a warm sea. It is the shadow of 3i Atlas, protecting us from the glare of the truth. Can you feel it? The slowing of the world, the lengthening of the night, the quiet of the machine, the peace of the passenger. Everything is exactly as it was meant to be. The Sumerian priests, the Siberian researchers, the dreamers in their beds. We are all joined in this final, unanswered question. What comes after the silence? But you don't need the answer. You are the experience. Take one final, long breath. Feel the air of June 26, 2026. It is the last air of the old epoch. It is the first air of the new. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. The sun is a heartbeat. The cylinder is a mirror. You are the light. The cycle is complete. Nothing is lost. Everything is remembered. Rest now. The observer is satisfied. Sleep in the glare. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night.